So we have what is known as the coordinate plane, which the y-axis and x-axis divide into 4 quadrants. So each point has an x location as well as a y location. So the instruction tells us to write down the coordinates for all the labeled points on the coordinate plane. This section here is quadrant 1. Point A has an x location and a y location. You move towards the x-axis and write down on the x-axis the x location is 1. Then you go across to the y-axis, identify the y location, and the y location is also 1. So for point A, coordinates are x equal 1, y equal 1. So we can do this, x equal 1, y equal 1. These are the coordinates. If you want to write it as a coordinate pair, you put it in bracket and write 1, 1. The first number refers to the x coordinate and the second number refers to the y coordinate. X, then y. This is the standard format for the coordinate pairs. Let's look at point F, not in order. X location and then a y location. So we look at point F, go down to the x-axis. That's located at 7 on the x-axis. So the y location is at 3. So that's 7, 3. And that's the coordinate pair for the point F. Let's look at point D. This one will be interesting. Now, if you notice, point D is a red dot on the y-axis. So let's look at point D. Point D, again, must have an x location and a y location. So if you look at point D, focus on the x-axis. Where point D is located, which value on the x-axis is point D above? I'm sure you recognize point D is above 0 on the x-axis. So the location of D on the x-axis, in reference to the x-axis, is 0. And the location of D on the y-axis, it's actually right there on the y-axis at 3. So the y coordinate is 3. Let's look at point L. Point L is above 0 as well. 0 is on the x-axis as well as the y-axis, but we're focusing on the x-axis. Point L, this red dot, is above 0 in reference to the x-axis. So the x location of L is 0 and the y location or the y coordinate is 7. Now if you look at both D and L, they're both found on the y-axis, and if you notice, they have the same x coordinate of 0. So that tells us that any point found on the y-axis, the x coordinate will be 0. But what about those points that are found below 0? Well, let's take point R for instance. Point R is found below 0 on the x-axis. So its x location is 0 and its y location is -4. Again, we are seeing a point found on the y-axis has an x coordinate of 0. Let's take point S. Its x location, if you go straight up to meet the x-axis, its x location in reference to the x-axis is 0 and its y location is -6. So all these points with an x coordinate of 0 are all located on the y-axis. So, once a point is located on the y-axis, its coordinates will be 0 and some value, let's say some value c, and c here represent the y coordinate. So this is our first quadrant as identified before. Over here now is our second quadrant. Let's select some points over here. So we have B, we go down to the x-axis and the x coordinate is -8. You always have to start with the x coordinate. You go across to the y-axis and the location there is 5. So B has a location of -8 on the x-axis and 5 on the y-axis. So its coordinates are x equal -8, y equals 5. Let's look at G. G has location -4 on the x-axis and 6 on the y-axis. Let's look at point I. Now point I is located where? On the x-axis itself. So this one is interesting. Previously we were looking at points found on the y-axis. But let's see what happens when the points are actually on the x-axis. What do you think will happen? Let's look at point I. So remember, every point has to have an x coordinate and a y coordinate. So this point is found on the x-axis. So its x coordinate is -9. What do you think its y coordinate will be? Well, when we located the y coordinate of B, we go straight across to the y-axis and it's at 5. Point B has a y coordinate of 5. Point G has a y coordinate of 6, as we see here. Point I, to get its y coordinate, we do the same as we have done for B and G. We go straight across to the y-axis and it hits the y-axis at 0. So think of this vertical line here, and these are the values on the y-axis: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So when we go straight across, we'll hit the y-axis at 0. So the I has a y coordinate of 0. Let's check the C point C out. It has an x-coordinate of -6 since it's on the x-axis at -6. But its y location, when we go straight across, it happens to have the same y coordinate as I, which is 0. What about the point Z? Now Z is found at the center, in other words, where the y-axis and x-axis cross. And so this point, it's at 0 on the x and also 0 on the y-axis. So the location of Z is 0, 0. Z here represents the origin point where both y and x-axis cross each other. Let's check out point T. And the location of point T on the x-axis is 2. And the y coordinate, we have to go across towards the y-axis, it's at 0. Let's check out point U now. 5, 0. Agree? And V will be what? 9, 0. So if you check this out, all these points with a y coordinate of 0, where are they found? I, C, Z, T, U, V. I, C, Z, T, U, and we did V as well. All of them have a what? A y coordinate of 0, because they're all found on the x-axis. So the x coordinate will be the value on the x-axis. The y coordinate of any point found on the x-axis will actually be 0. Hope that is clear. Okay, so let's look at these and we just put them here on the coordinate plane. The location of N is -10 and we'll cross -9. The location of Q, we go up towards the x-axis, that's 3, -7. What about the location of H? You tell me. We don't focus on the letter but the point next to the letter. So the point here is represented as H, so it's -5, and H on the y towards y-axis, it's -5 as well. -5, 5. What about K? K's location, -2 in reference to the x-axis, and -8 in reference to the y-axis. What about W? W is actually found on the y-axis, so its y coordinate will be -9, but the x coordinate, which must be first, will be 0. As long as it's found on the one of the axes, one of the coordinates will be 0. And since we're talking about the y-axis, then it's the x-coordinate that will be 0. All right, and we dealt with V already. What did we say about V? V is actually on the x-axis, so y will be 0, but x value will be 9. E, what about E? E will be, go straight up towards the x-axis, it will be 7, and the y coordinate will be -9. And what about point O? That will be 2, -2. Point F will be 7, go across, 3. Point M will be what? -3, 1. And point P will be -1, -1. And the last one, J, up, that'll be 9, -6. Hopefully this video was helpful. In the next video, we'll look at actually plotting points. So we'll try to plot these points on the coordinate plane in the next video. That will be part 2. So look out for that. So in one case, we are actually identifying the location of points. And the next video, we'll be plotting given points. I think this will be helpful in strengthening your understanding of identifying points or plotting points on a graph.